As a beginner to DevOps, you will always wonder which particular CI CD tool to learn and get the hands on with. There are so many tools in the market. There is Jenkins, Azure DevOps, GitLab, Bitbucket Pipeline, Travis CI, Argo CD, and a lot more, and it is growing day by day. So this is what my personal perspective based on my 12 years of experience into cloud and DevOps. I feel we should always start with Jenkins as the first CI CD tool because it is kind of a framework in which you integrate all your tools together, right? So you do the integration, you do the, let's say, webhook integration by yourself, you do the SonarQube integration, you do the integration with other version control tools such as GitHub, some build repositories such as Artifactory. So there is a lot to do, and when there is a lot to do, there is a lot of learning for that. If we compare that with a tool such as Azure DevOps, which has everything intact within itself, it has a version control, it has a build repository, it has a test plan, and many more such services. So there is no need for integrating all those tools together. It is one big suite of tools, right? So that is why I would suggest to always start with Jenkins as your first CI CD tool. So that is why I have created this video, and in this video we'll be starting with the very basics of DevOps, basics of CI CD. Then we'll start with simple freestyle project. Then we'll do a multi-stage project. We'll be doing our hands dirty with Jenkins declarative pipeline, which is written in YAML and which is the industry standard. So this could be a long video. Stay tuned till the end, and I promise you by the end your knowledge of Jenkins CI CD will be top notch. So without any further ado, let's start with this video. Before we deep dive into CI CD and modern development philosophies, let's have a look at the traditional software development lifecycle and what were the issues with it. Let's say we have multiple teams working in a project such as developer, operations team, quality assurance team or testing team. And then we have a production support team which usually work on the production environments. There could be much more. Multiple developers commit the code to a version control system. Once the code is committed and approved, someone from ops team would then create a build using the code base that was committed. Build is then placed to a shared folder or a network drive or on an environment. The ops team would then deploy the build to a lower environment such as quality assurance. After transferring the build to that environment, testing team is that notified and they start executing their test cases against the build. Reports are then provided to the developers and other stakeholders about the test cases. Developers would then fixes the bugs and defects and commit the code again, and this process will continue for other environments such as SIT, performance test environment. There could be hundreds of more environments. Once the change management approves the changes, someone from production support will then deploy the build to the production environment after transferring the build from other environment that was already being tested. Let's have a look at the problems with the traditional software development lifecycle workflow. So in older days, dev, QAs, operation team, prod support, these teams were often siloed and work independently and have no visibility in what's going on with other team, even though they were working on the same project. A large group of developers coded for months and they handed the completed code to quality assurance for testing. Quality assurance then run tests and handed bugs back to the developer for quick fix. Then developer fix the bugs and handed code back to the quality assurance who reruns the tests. Quality assurance then handed the tested code to packaging or deployment team or prod support team for deployment into the production. And then they release the complete product all at once. And if there are any bugs or defects in the production system, then they have to go and do the process all over again. So it's a bit tedious and cumbersome, and there were a lot of issues involved with this approach. So let's see what all those issues are. So first one, this is really a time consuming process to deliver all product at once. Then it is unproductive. Changes and releases to the production system are costly, and because there is no coordination between different teams, therefore there is a lack of transparency Developers don't know what's going on in production, and prod support team don't know what all the features are upcoming. And then there are a lot of management bottlenecks. So changes are delayed or even rejected at the very last moment, and all the teams have no visibility on what's going on with that. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot more issues involved with the traditional workflow. That is why there was a need to change this into some modern deployment and development philosophies. Then agile, continuous integration and development, it all comes into the picture. So modern development philosophies, they works and emphasis mainly on collaboration between different teams and individuals. It emphasizes on flexibility in planning and development rather than just executing the tasks. And it emphasizes on shorter dev cycles. Agile mainly concerns adapting, planning, and evolutionize the development work. Work is planned and completed in sprints. This is usually 1 or 2 weeks of work with frequent, usually daily scrum meetings where all team members report progress and plan their next step. In these meetings, blockers are also reported so that it can be removed or necessary action can be taken in advance. DevOps extend the agile philosophy into operations and production by implementing the automation, monitoring, and feedback of all the steps in the development cycle. Sometimes DevOps is considered as a usage of tools to automate different tasks in the CI/CD process. However, DevOps is merely a cultural change which brings all the teams together under one single umbrella and to remove all the bottlenecks that were there as part of the previous deployment methodologies. Then we have a term which is also used very frequently, which is continuous. So continuous implements agile and DevOps philosophy with the help of tools that standardize the steps in the process and thoroughly test each code modification before it is integrated into the official source code. Let's see what are these terms in detail. So let's say we have a process, software development lifecycle process, which usually involves these steps like code commit, build, integrate, test, release, deploy, operate. This is a complete SDLC lifecycle nowadays that we see. And continuous feedback at all the stages were provided from each of the stage. Then if we see the code commit and build part, so this is where Agile operates. Agile development is mainly concerned with the development. It does not have any say in operationalizing or testing or releases to the production. So Agile is just for the development. Then we have CI, which is continuous integration. It goes from code commit till testing and integration. Then we have CD, which is continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is delivery of code from the developer till the production. However, it requires a gate before the production deployment. Usually a manual approval is required before the production, and once it is approved, only then deployment to the production is triggered. However, we have another important term which is continuous deployment. Continuous deployment is deploying the code, deploying the feature till the production environment without any manual intervention. So understand the difference between continuous delivery and deployment. Delivery involves manual approval before the production deployment. However, continuous deployment is automated at every step. Let's have a look at the difference between CI/CD and continuous deployment. So CI is frequent and automatic integration of code. All the new and modified code is automatically tested with the master code. Continuous delivery is an extension of CI. It ensures that code is always ready to be deployed, although manual approval is required to actually deploy the software to production. However, continuous deployment automatically deploys all validated changes to production Frequent feedback enables issues to be found and fixed quickly. So to successfully implement continuous delivery, it is essential to have a collaborative working relationship with everyone involved. You can then use delivery pipelines, which are automatic implementation of your product's lifecycle. Alright, now we know what exactly is CI/CD. Let's have a look why actually we need it. To detect bugs and problems in the early stages of SDLC. It saves a lot of cost and efforts. It improves the coordination between different teams, hence innovative ideas thrive. Faster releases to the production system. Automated testing helps deliver a top-notch quality product. Minimum human intervention, hence there are less chances of manual errors because everything is automated. Let's have a look at Cloudbreeze and Jenkins community. What is Jenkins? What is Cloudbreeze? How they are related with each other? So Jenkins is most widely used CI CD server. Kosuke Kawaguchi, one of the founders of Cloudbreeze, created this tool in 2006 as the Hudson project, and then in 2011 it was renamed as Jenkins. Jenkins is maintained and supported by an independent and active community, which is Jenkins.io, and they welcomes new contributor for all technical and experience level. Cloudbreeze partners with Jenkins community for development and maintenance tasks, and Cloudbreeze engineer, they contribute significantly to the Jenkins project, and they coordinate with the community on releases and contribute fixes back to the community. We'll now have a look at the Jenkins workflow. Let's say you have multiple developers working on a feature. They would commit the code to a version control system on their feature branch using a pull request. Code will then be merged to the deployment branch once it is approved. As soon as the code is merged, Jenkins would trigger a build with the help of a webhook using tools such as Maven, Gradle, npm. Once the build is created successfully, it would trigger the test cases using the tools such as Selenium, JUnit, and then it reports the test cases to the developer and stakeholders, and it will be uploaded to a repository for archiving and analytics purpose. If the test cases are passed, then the build will be scanned for vulnerability and static code analysis using tools such as Black Duck, SonarQube. Once the previous stages are successful, it will upload the build to a build repository such as Nexus, JFrog Artifactory. This complete process from build, test, scan, integration is commonly referred to as continuous integration or CI. The build is then transferred to a lower environment such as dev for the deployment using tools such as Ansible, Helm for Kubernetes related deployments. Once it is approved and tested in dev, it would then be deployed in a pre-prod or a UAT environment. Once it is approved and testing in UAT, it is then ready for the deployment in production. The process of deploying all the validated changes onto the production environment is called continuous deployment. However, continuous delivery ensures that manual approval is required before delivering the code to production. CD also involves continuous feedback and monitoring at all the stages of the software development lifecycle, and this complete process can be automated using Jenkins pipeline. Pipeline is actually a glue which holds all the tools and steps together in a process. This is an ongoing and continuous process. So once one feature is completed, team will start working on the next feature and they will work in parallelly as well. Alright then, let's have a look at the different things that we need to take care of before we start the Jenkins installation. First is Java requirement. Make sure you understand the Java requirement for Jenkins. It only supports Java runtime environment 8 or version 11. So make sure you install the latest OpenJDK version 11 in order to run the Jenkins. Disk space requirement, another important thing. So all the jobs and configs, build artifacts, logs and backups, these objects take a lot of space. on the file system. So make sure you plan accordingly. As part of the best practices, you should offload these to external storages such as Nexus, Artifactory, S3 bucket if you are using AWS, Azure storage if you are using Azure, so that they are not stored on the Jenkins master. Also, the Jenkins home directory should be in its own file system. You can also use symlinks if it's too late for you. Then let's have a look at the hardware requirement. Make sure you have at least 4 GB of RAM and at least 50 GB of drive space for a small Jenkins installation for a small organization. Another important thing is to make sure to open all the ports for Jenkins master, SSH and Jenkins slaves. Jenkins master by default it runs on port 8080, but you can customize this. You can use a custom port as well. For SSH you need to open port 22, and for Jenkins slave the default port is 50,000, but you can use any high-end port for that. So make sure if you are using any cloud services or any on-prem server, make sure you have this port open for communication. Now let's have a look at the different methods that we have for Jenkins installation. You can choose from any of these methods as per your requirement and your organizational needs. First one is you can use Linux packages like RPM packages for Jenkins installation. This is the most basic one. Then you can use a Jenkins war file. So you can download the latest war file from the website and you just run it using the JRE that you have installed. Then you can run it on application servers such as Apache Tomcat or Glassfish. You can also run this as a Docker container. So most of the organizations, they either run it as Docker container or the next option, which is as a Kubernetes container. So you can choose from any of those. And in this video, we'll be talking about the Linux packages, Jenkins for file, and as a Docker container. These three installation options we'll be having a look. Let's have a look at our first option, which is installation as a Linux package. So as we discussed earlier as well, it requires Java version 8 or 11. So we'll be first installing OpenJDK version 11 on the Ubuntu machine, and then we'll be installing Jenkins using the below commands. Once it is done, we could just perform all these commands at the right side. We can use these commands to start, stop or restart Jenkins, or even check the status of Jenkins. So let's go back to our Linux machine and let's have a look. To perform the Jenkins installation, I've already spun up a Ubuntu server on AWS. And if we look at the security section over here, I've already opened the port 50,000 for Jenkins master and slave communication. Port 8080 and 9090, these are the ports on which Jenkins master will be listening to. Port 22 for SSH. Because this is just for the demo purpose, I have already opened it for every IP in the world, but make sure you put your dedicated IP's range over here. Just log into the server. I'll just do an SSH. I have already loaded the key in the pagent tool. So what I'll do is I'll copy the public DNS IP from here. And this is my putty. I'm logged in. First step is to install the JDK version 11. So I'll do a sudo apt-get update first. Once this is done, I'll run this command to install OpenJDK. Hit enter. I'll provide all the commands and all the steps in the description section below, so don't worry about it. Once this is done, I'll run the installation command, which is this. Alright, so OpenJDK is installed. Let's have a look at the version. So you see OpenJDK version 11.0.13, which is the latest version. This has been installed. I'll just clear the screen and I'll just run the command over here like this. This is done. Sudo apt-get update again. Now let's do sudo apt-get install Jenkins. After the installation is done, we'll have to run this command, run it as a service, then systemctl start Jenkins. Okay, it says it is active, starting Jenkins. Just copy the IP from here, and by default it will listen to port 8080. So port 8080, and it will show you the login page, right? So this initial admin password, you can copy it from here. First password, provide the permission to that directory first. Able to perform cat on it. So this is the initial Jenkins password. Copy it from here, paste it over here, click continue. Then when it will ask you for install suggested plugin or select plugin to install, just click on this one and it will install few basic plugins for you. We'll discuss later on the course what are the plugins, how to install that, how to upgrade that. It will be there in different videos, so don't worry about it. But for now, just I'm just getting you started with your first Jenkins. It will take just few seconds, and once it is done, you could just create your first admin user with a name admin. To verify your Jenkins URL once, it's fine for now. So this is your Jenkins main page. Once you install it, once you start it, and then there'll be a lot of different things that we'll be looking later in the course. So if you want to start or Jenkins, you should be using systemctl commands. I'll just clear the screen. Or just like we did status Jenkins, you could do a restart as well. Start the Jenkins instance for you. So if you just reload it, it'll take few seconds because it's been restarting. Okay, let's put admin username and password. Or you could just do this as well. You could just at the end of the URL, you could just add this string restart. This will also prompt you if you want to restart Jenkins or not. Now that we have seen how to install it as a Linux package, let's have a look at the next method, which is installation as a WAR file. So you first install JDK version 11. So this we have already done it. The next is to download the latest WAR file from this website using the w8 command or the curl command. And then you run the file with the Java options. You can specify your port with --HTTP ports like over here. And this ampersand is used to run this particular process in background, so that even if your session crash or even if you close the session, the process will keep on running. We already have a Jenkins instance running, so I'll just stop this one. And I'll go to a directory, home Ubuntu. I'll probably make a new directory, which is Jenkins. I'll provide this appropriate permissions. Go to this particular directory and issue the wget command to download the latest WAR file from the Jenkins website. So this command I've already mentioned in the description section. So this is downloaded over here, jenkins.var. Now I will be running this using the Java command that we have seen before. 𝗔𝗀-jar Jenkins.var --http port. This is the port on which Jenkins will be listening to. Earlier it was 8080. So I'll hit enter. Okay. So the administrative password would be over here, the one-time password, or you can just cat this file as well. You'll find it there as well. So let's just go to this. Just replace. So if you hit enter right now, I've already stopped the previous instance, so this will no longer be working. So I'll just replace the port with 9090. This is the one on which our new Jenkins is listening. And it will ask you for the admin password, which I've just copied from there. And if we continue, it will basically do all the same things that we did for the first one. So I'll just pause the video for now and we'll do the next option that we have. Alright, so now that we have seen the war file installation, let's have a look at the next option, which is install it as a Docker container. So first we have to install the Docker engine. So we'll be following up the guidelines given in the URL over here. Then we'll be starting the Jenkins container using the docker run command. We'll be providing it a name. You can use your own custom name as per your needs. Then you run it in a detach mode so that it will run the container in background. Then you publish the port. So 8080 would be the one, or whatever ports we are using. These would be the one on which our Jenkins master will be listening. This is for the slave and Jenkins master communication. Then we'll be using persistent volume over here to basically map the directory on the Ubuntu machine to that of the container. And this will map the Jenkins home directory that we are currently in with the one that is there in the container itself. So in Jenkins container, there'll be a directory /var/Jenkins home. It will map that directory with the one that we are there in currently. If we don't have the Jenkins home directory, it will create one. And basically these will be the persistent volume. So even if you stop your Docker container, restart it or remove it, these persistent volume will still be there. So you won't lose any data. And then the last one is the Jenkins image that we are downloading from the Docker Hub. This is the latest stack. And that's basically everything. So once this is done, Jenkins will be accessible on the port that you have specified over here. Alright, so to install the Docker engine, first we'll be following instructions from this site over here. Scroll down a bit, set up the repository first, sudo apt-get update, and then do this. Apt-get install CS certificate, curl utility, and should already be there, but let's just run the command once. Are already installed to the latest version, so that is good. Then add the Docker's official GPG key. Done. Command. Okay, it's good. Now let's install the Docker engine. Let's do a Docker update first. Then run this command over. Alright, this is done. Alright, now that we have installed Docker engine, let's go ahead and run the docker run command to start a Jenkins container. So this is the command that I have copied earlier. We have discussed this as well. Enter. Okay, so it will download the image and then it will start your container. It will just take few seconds. Docker ps to see if it has been started or not. Docker logs and name of your Jenkins. So we gave it a name as my Jenkins. So this is the same name I'm using over here. And this is the log, the std out log generated by Jenkins installation. And here is our admin password. Here, and I'll just go back to my URL. take the public IP. So we have the Jenkins unlock screen. Copy it from here. Yeah, I mean, rest of the steps are same for all that we have seen. I hope following these steps, you would be able to install your Jenkins by your own way. So Docker is most recommended way, Docker or installing it as a Kubernetes container. Alright, if you would have followed my video till here, so you should see a screen something like this. This is basically the Jenkins startup screen for the first time when you log in. It should be accessible on port 8080 on the public IP of your server. So it will show you two different options to get yourself started with. First is to start building a software project using create a job wizard. Second one is to set up a distributed build. So distributed build we'll see later in the course, but for now we'll focus on this one, create job. So you can start your first job by clicking over here, create a job, or from the new item itself. So let's click over here and you see different type of projects you could choose from. So freestyle project is what we're gonna start with. So let's call it a test project. Okay, I'll click over here, freestyle, and click OK. Once you do that, the jobs configuration page will be open and it will have again different tabs and different options. So first one is a description. You could put any description over here. Let's put test project. Then have these options as well. Discard, you want to discard old builds. Is it a GitHub project or the project is parameterized? This is also important. So if you click over here, you could choose multiple parameters. Like it could be a string parameter, run, password, choice, boolean. Let's use string for now. Let's give it a name. Name is name, and I'll give this a value as well, Piyush. Okay. And then we have other option, which is source code management. When we'll be working with different source code management like GitHub, I'll show you how you can configure this, but for now let's keep it none. Then we have build trigger. So if you don't choose anything from here, it will be a manual run. But there are different options by which you could trigger a build, that is trigger build remotely using the scripts. Build after other projects are built. So these are like the dependent builds. Let's say project A is completed, only then this will be triggered, but it will be auto triggered once a project is completed. Then you could also add build periodically, in which you could add cron syntax if you want to run it at a certain interval, something like this. And then we have a webhook. I'll show you later in the course what exactly is a webhook and how it works. Then we have build environments. So again, different options to set before the build is triggered. Say delete the workspace before starting the build. Workspace is a temporary area where all the build artifacts, all the logs will be stored on your Jenkins environment. And then there are these options as well. Then we have build step and post build actions. As this is our first build, we'll use this execute shell. So basically we could run any shell script over here, Unix commands over here, and Jenkins will execute that. So let's say echo hello Jenkins. Then we have multiple options. Again, we could add multiple execute shells or multiple build steps over here. Post build action is action that you want to perform once the build is completed. Let's say archiving the artifact, or if you want to build other project, or if we want to notify the users via email, all those things can be done. So for now, let's just click on apply and save. Once you do that, so this is the jobs page. If you want to go back again, you click over here, and this is the first job that you have created. This is the name, last success, last failure, last duration. All these are NA because it's hasn't been built yet. So let's click over here, and I'll click over build with parameters. Because we have used a string parameter, that is why it is showing as build with parameter. Otherwise, it would have been just build option over here. So let's click over here. This was the string that we have selected. Remember, we use a string with the name as name and value default value as Piyush. You could update this as well. Okay. Or you could just keep the default value and then click on build. Once you do that, it will trigger the build over here. Just refresh the page. Okay, so this has been completed. You could check the output from drop down over here, console output, or if you could just directly click over here and console output will show you this. So this was the only shell script that we had, hello Jenkins, and it has printed that, and the build status is success. Now if you go back to this, now it's showing you the last success and there is no failure yet. That is why it is still blank, and this is the build duration. So this was the first build, and let's do some more changes and let's see how we can further improve this. Now before running our next build or next job, we'll do some configuration changes. We'll install some plugin and let's have a look what are those and how it is used. So I'll click over here on the left section, manage Jenkins. So this is the administrative page of Jenkins. All the configuration can be managed from here. We'll see every configuration one by one, but for now let's click over here, manage plugins. So plugins are nothing but the frameworks that have been created by open source community, and they are built to perform a certain task with ease of use. So we'll be building a Maven project this time. So I'll install a Maven plugin as well as a Git plugin. So first we need to check if that's been already installed or not. So there are 4 different options. First is update. So if you want to update any plugin to the latest version, you could just select it from here and click over here. If you want to see what all the plugins are already installed, you click over here, available, and it will show you the plugins that are available for you to install. And then we have installed. These are the plugins that have been installed when we installed the Jenkins. At the beginning of the Jenkins installation, there was a installation screen in which we have selected install suggested plugins. So these plugins were installed with that. Then we have another tab which is advanced. Over here, if you are in an organization behind a corporate proxy, you could configure your HTTP proxy configuration over here. And basically that's it. Let's go over here and see if the plugins that we are looking for are already installed or not. So I'll click over here, Maven, and Maven is available, but it's not installed. So I'll select this one. And there are 2 options, install without restart or download now and install after restart. So I'll select the first one. It will take a few seconds and then plugin will be installed. So Maven integration was the plugin that we choose. But JavaDoc and this plugin, they are the dependent plugins that will be installed with this one. Okay, so it's now installed. Let's go back. And now it should be in the install section over here. Okay, Maven is there. Now let's check for the Git. It should be installed as well. So you see Git plugin over here. So this is already installed. And if you are using any other source code management system like GitLab or Bitbucket, you could install that as well. So let's say GitLab. Click over here, install without restart. So this will install the GitLab plugin for you. So these are installed as well. Now that we have installed these plugins, let's go back and see if it's installed properly or not. So I'll go back to my Jenkins homepage, go back to my job, click the configure section. This is the configuration changes that we made when we created this job. So now over here, if you scroll down to the build triggers, you will see another option that was not there before, which says build when a change is pushed to GitLab, and GitLab webhook URL is this one. So this was not there before, but with the help of plugin, it is visible over here and it made things easy for us. Now we can directly configure a webhook to the GitLab so that whenever a change has been pushed or committed to the branch in GitLab, this build will be auto-triggered with that. We'll guide you through how we can set up the webhook later, but for now, just uncheck this and let's see how we can clone a GitHub repository. To clone a repository, it's really simple. Let's go back to a Google homepage and let's search for sample Maven project. Okay, and usually this is the first link that you see, github.com jenkins.simple Java Maven. So this is the official Maven app provided by Jenkins. So if we click over here and you see there are two different type of cloning URLs. One is a GitHub CLI, then HTTPS. I'll copy this one, HTTPS, and I'll go back to my Jenkins page, and in the source code management section where it was showing as Git, click over here. I'll put the repository URL. So because this is a public project and it is available for everyone to use, that is why we don't need to put any credential over here. But later in the course, we'll also see how you can configure credential for the private projects. So for now, this is sufficient. I have entered the repository URL and that should be it. I'll just apply and save the project. So now when I'm building the project again, you'll see things are different now, because now it will do a lot more than just printing the hello world. What it did is it cloned the repository that we have entered and it downloaded that into the Jenkins workspace. So first you'll see a path over here, building in workspace, and your repository will be downloaded. So git checkout has been performed over here for you. And now you must be wondering, it is downloaded, but how can you make sure that this repository was actually downloaded? So let's go back to our Jenkins server on the backend, and I'll just log into my Jenkins first because I'm running it as a container. So I'll do a docker exec -t, the name of Jenkins, and bash. Now I'm inside the Jenkins. Let's go to the Jenkins homepage. Where Jenkins home. Once we are there, there is I'll just clear the screen. If I do ls-ld */, you'll see all the folders inside this. So you have a folder which is workspace. So workspace is nothing but a temporary location where all your jobs data will be stored, logs, artifacts, everything. So I'll go inside that workspace and you'll see one folder with the name as our job test folder. If we would have created multiple jobs, there are multiple folders, one for each job. So let's go inside the folder, clear the screen again. And there are two folders, src, Jenkins, and then two files, pom.xml and readme.md. So if we go back to our GitHub URL, these are the same files that are here. And there is git attributes and git ignore because these are hidden files. So you could see with ls-la. So these files are also here, git attributes and git ignore. So this is how you navigate to the Jenkins workspace where all your job data and all the artifacts will be stored temporarily. Now we'll be configuring Maven first so that we could use it to create a build and run tests on that. So I'll go back to my Jenkins console, go back to my Jenkins homepage, click over here, manage Jenkins. Then we go to global tool configuration over here. So you see, because we installed Git already, so it is already showing it over here, but we haven't configured Maven yet. So if you scroll down at the very bottom, you will see a Maven installation. So I'll click over here, add Maven. You could give it a name, let's say my Maven. And then you could choose the version that you want to install, or you could just select the latest version and click apply and then save, and that should be it. Now, if I go back to my job again, I should probably rename it to something meaningful. So let's click over here, click rename, give it Maven job, rename. Okay. Now I click over here again, configure. Now if you scroll down, I'll remove this parameter for now. If you scroll down in the build section and click over here at the drop down, I'll add another build section, which is invoke top level Maven targets, this one over here. And we choose the version that we have installed, my Maven, and then we specify the goals. what are the operations that we are expecting out of this. So I'll paste the command -b-d skip test and clean package. This will create a build for you and skip the tests by default. Because we have already selected the Maven version, we don't need to specify mvn command over here. So this should be sufficient. And let's say initiating build, and that is, I'll click over save and I'll run the build again. So now because I removed the parameter, it is just build now over here. Build is scheduled and it will appear over here. I'll click here and it will show me the console output. So it is downloading the Maven installation from the Apache website, and then it is installing it. Once it is done, it is, it says building the jar, created an artifact over here in the Jenkins workspace itself, and the build is success. Total time it took is this one. Okay, so the build has been completed and the job has been completed. So this jar was created when we invoked the Maven target. Let's see if it was created. So I'll go back over here in my workspace section. Because we have renamed the job, now we'll see a new folder, Maven job. I'll go inside that. There is another folder, target, and I'll just clear the screen again. And now see a myapp 1.0 snapshot.jar file. So this is the artifact that was generated when we created the build. Code has been built. We have a build artifact created already. Let's run another stage in this Jenkins pipeline, which is a test. So I'll go back to my job, click on the configure section, right? And then in the build step itself, I'll add one more step. Again, the same type, invoke top level Maven targets, and I'll select the version. And this time I'll just add the command test, and I'll apply it and click on save. And I've run the build again. Now it will create the build again from the latest source code from GitHub. So let's see. First, it will run the clean package command, which will package the code into a jar file. Okay, once the code is built, building jar, build is success. Then it will run the test command, scan for the project. So the project that we have used, if you see in the GitHub, it already has the test cases written. So there is this folder in which we have apptest.java. So Maven will, scan for this file, and if it finds the test file, then it will run the test cases against it. So it scanned the project, it found the file, then it says 𝗓𝗺𝗏 reports directory. So in this directory in the workspace, your test reports will be uploaded, and these are the test results. Status is success. Now let's go to this. And now you'll see 𝗓𝗏 reports. Okay, and I'll just clear the screen again. So you'll see this XML and a test file as well. So that means your test cases has been executed successfully, and because it is showing the status as success, that means all the test cases were passed. There is no failure. Right, we have performed the testing. Now let's go back to our job again. Let's click on configure. So now what we have done so far is we have checked out the code from GitHub. We executed the Maven build. We packaged the build. Then we did tests on that build. The next step is to deploy that build on the environment. So I'll click over here, add build step again, and I'll add an execute shell this time. Let's add some asterisks. To deploy a jar file, generally you would do java-jar and the file name. So file name, we need to provide the absolute location of the file on the server. So I'll go back to my server, go back to the targets. So I'm here in my Jenkins workspace. And so this is the location where Jenkins home workspace, Maven job. This is a job name, and the folder name is target. And then we have a jar file. So there is just one jar file. So I'll just click this, paste it over here, and then I'll take the file name as well. Or what else I could do, I could replace this absolute path with the environment variables, which is like good practice. So Jenkins has some inbuilt environment variables available for us to use. So what you can do is you could just copy your Jenkins URL, paste it in a new tab, and at the end add this string 𝗃𝗏𝗧𝗏.html. So there is no underscore in between that, but there is an hyphen. So if you click on that, you'll see all the Jenkins variable that is there for us to use. So now what we need is a Jenkins workspace till here. Then this is the job name, then target. So the workspace variable is over here. This is absolute path of the directory assigned to build as a workspace. So I'll copy this and I'll replace the workspace URL with $workspace, then the Maven job. So for job, there is the variable is job name. So I'll replace this again. This look much neat now. So now target folder will be the same, and this we can also change into the environment variable, but for now let's keep this as it is. So this is done. I'll just save the changes and I'll build the project again. All right. So now we have a failure because it says unable to access jar file. The workspace variable that we have used, you see Maven job is twice over here. So that means workspace includes the job name. So I'll just quickly make that change. Click over configure. Remove the job name because this workspace is dedicated for this job. So that should be good. Now I'll click build now again. And if we see the console output, now it says success. So this was our statement, echo deploying jar, and then the command that we have passed. And this is the output of that command. So that jar file, it was like an hello world application because this is not a front end application. This is a back end application. That is why it is showing as output over here. So if you have followed all the steps till now, or if you had continued watching my videos till now, then you would have built a complete CI CD pipeline from git checkout to deployment of the code to the environment. Now as part of our next stage, we'll publish the test reports to a graph so that it could be presented while you are on the screen. So let's go to our job and click over here, configure. And in the post build section at the very bottom of the screen, click over here and there'll be an option over here, publish JUnit test reports. So I'll select this one and then it will ask you for the test report XML path. So if you go back to your Jenkins directory, this path is available in the logs as well. So if I do a pwd and ls, so there is nothing over here because I just reran the job. So let's go over here again, target, and then there'll be a folder surefire reports. If you do star.xml, this is the report that was generated. So I just need the path from here, target surefire, because this workspace folder, it's already part of that plugin installation. So I'll just put the name over here and I'll use the wildcard character that all the reports inside that folder. Okay, click over apply and then save. Okay, now it needs to have at least, I guess, 5 runs. So I'll just quickly pause the video and run the job multiple times, and then you'll see the graph appear over here. After I ran it for a certain number of times and waited for a few minutes, this graph will appear over here. So it's basically showing the test case trend over the time. So there were 2 test cases, and because this is all blue, that means they all were passed. If it would have been failed, then it would have changed the color to red, or skipped, then it would have grayed out. Okay, so this is how you can visualize graph in a real time of all the test cases that have been executed as part of all the jobs execution. Now that you have deployed the core as well, let's say the same artifacts is needed by some of your team members to be deployed in some other environment. And since we are not using any build repository till now, how would that artifact made available to the other members of my team? And if you are running Jenkins as a PaaS service, then you wouldn't have access to the backend server as well. Only Jenkins admin would have access to this backend to be so that the artifacts can be downloaded from here. But how would you make sure that artifacts are available over here after the job execution? So for that, we'll go back to configure section. We'll add one more build section at the very bottom, and this time it would be archive the artifacts, the second one over here. It'll ask you the path of the files to archive. So this should be target and then *.jar. So you don't need to add the workspace path over here as well. So that should be good. And then if you go to advanced on this over here, you would want to only archive the build that is successful. You don't want your server to be overloaded with some artifacts that are unstable or that is not usable. Okay, so that's why I'm selecting this option over here. So click apply, save, and let's just run the build again. Let's see what happens over here now. So I'll go to console output, it's deploying the jar, and it's recording the test results. It's archiving the artifacts. Let's go back over here. And now this time you will see your last successful artifact is over here for you to download. And there is your workspace folder as well. So you could click over here and the artifact would be downloaded for you to use. That is how you will archive your artifacts from your last success. So the next step that you would want to do is trigger the email whenever a build is failed or whenever there is an unstable build. So you click over here, configure, and you go to post build section, and then you add a section over here, which is there are actually 2 type of steps that you could choose from: email notification or editable email notification. So email notification is this one, which will ask you just the basic details like recipient and send for every unstable build and send for the individual who broke the build. But if you choose editable email notification, it will provide you a lot more details like send from address, project recipient, reply to list, content type, and you could update the subject content, and you could attach the build log as well by selecting this option. But to enable this email notification, make sure you have 2 things. First is the SMTP port 25 is open from the Jenkins server. Second thing, you need to have the SMTP server configured. So to configure the SMTP server, let's open this in a new tab and go to the manage section and go to configure system. Go to the very bottom of the page and you'll see email notification over here and editable email notification or extended email notification over here. So you need to provide your SMTP server details over here and here as well, like depending on whichever build step you are using. So once you do that, you should be able to trigger the mail from your Jenkins. Let's have a look how you can authenticate yourself as a valid Jenkins user on any private GitHub repository. So there are many different ways by which you can do that. So SSH authentication is one of the most secure and easiest way to achieve this. So there are 2 keys involved in this, public and private key, which you generate and then share among the services. And then you should be able to authenticate yourself as a valid user. So let's see how it works. So you have Jenkins and a Git based SCM. So it works with GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, and many other version control system. Jenkins has its own credential store where it stores all the secret text, private public keys, passwords in an encrypted format. So you as a Jenkins admin or as a user would generate the public and private key pair using SSH keygen utility on your server. You'll have your private key and a public key. Once you do that, private key is generally stored in a Jenkins credential store, and it would be provided a credential ID which you can use in any job. And public key will be uploaded to the GitHub repository. So Jenkins, using the private key, it passes that private key to the GitHub repository and asks for the authentication token. Once the key is passed and GitHub matches the public and private key pair, and if it finds it valid, then it will authenticate the user as a valid user, and you should be able to run your job, and you should be able to perform your git checkout and other git related commands on that private repository. Now let's go ahead and actually see how the GitHub authentication works. So I'm in my GitHub repositories. So I'll click on new and create a new private repository. I'll give it a name, test repo, and then I'll select it as a private repository. I'll add a README file, create repository. Now let's go to our SSH terminal and generate a public private key pair using SSH keygen utility. It generally resides in your home folder inside .ssh directory, which is this one for me. So I probably should have it already. So let me remove the existing keys, id rsa and then id rsa.pub. I removed them. So now I don't have it. Let's go ahead and generate a new public and private key pair. So I'll do ssh -keygen. There are other parameters as well with this tool which you can provide, but I'll just keep it default for now and hit enter. And if you keep hitting enter, it will use all the default values for it, which is what we need. So if I do clear and do an ls again, I'll see the new keys that has been generated over here. So I'll take the public key from here, which is id rsa.pub, and upload this in our GitHub account. So let's copy it from here. Okay, and go to settings in GitHub page, and SSH and GPG keys over here. Create a new key, give it a name. Let's call it Jenkins new, and I'll paste the content over here. Remove the last blank line and hit add SSH key. Right, now let's go to our Jenkins and manage Jenkins, then manage credentials. Click over here, Jenkins, then global credentials, and add a new credential. So we have different credential type to select it from: username and password, GitHub app, GitLab API token, SSH, username and private key, and so on. But GitHub recently removed, if you are not an enterprise customer, GitHub recently removed the support for username and password type credential. So we'll be using SSH username and private key, which is this one. Let's select this, and then scope, I'll keep it as default for all the jobs. Then I'll give it an ID. Let's call it Jenkins. I'll use the same description. Username, I'll give Ubuntu. And then private key, we have to upload the private key over here. So click over here, enter directly, and then click add. So I have to paste the private key over here. So if I go back to my terminal, clear the screen, and I'll do a cat on id rsa. So this is my private key. I'll copy the content of it and I'll paste it over here. Remember to remove the last line over here as well. Click OK. Okay, the credentials has been stored over here. If I go back over here and I create a new item, let's call it test-git and choose the freestyle project. Click OK. So I have to provide the GitHub URL over here. So let's click over here. I'll go back to my repository, which is this one, test repo. I'll select the HTTPS, click on copy, and I'll paste it over here. Now, because I'm not passing any credential and it is a private repository, that is why you're getting the authentication error. So to overcome this error, what I have to do is we have to first use the SSH URL, which is from here. I'll replace it with the SSH URL and then use the credential that we have stored. This is the private key. Now we are getting permission denied because we haven't used the credentials yet. So let's select this and this error should be gone. All right. Now the next important thing to remember over here is GitHub recently changed the default branch name from master to main. You see the branches to build over here is master because this used to be the default branch. But now if you go to the repository, main is the default branch that has been created. So make sure you make this update over here. I'll replace the master to main. All right, click on apply and save. Once you do that and click on build now, build should be triggered over here and status is success. So let's see what it did. First of all, it built the job in the workspace. Then it did git rev pass and git config, git version to check if the client has been installed, and then it fetch the git repository from the private repository, and this is the message for our initial commit. So our first step is done. Now let's go back to the job configuration section and go to build triggers. So there are different options by which we can trigger the build. For this job, when we clicked on build now, then only it triggered the build. That means by default it is a manual trigger. But we have different option to set it from. We will not be looking into each one of those, but only the important one, which is poll SCM, GitHub webhook, and build periodically. So let's see what these options are. The first one is build periodically. Build periodically, as you see, it is used to automate the time-based job execution. So it has a cron based syntax. If we go back and we use this one, build periodically, you see you can provide your schedule over here like a cron syntax. If you want it to run every minute, then this is the syntax that you would choose. So let's see a little more into what type of syntax is a cron syntax. Okay, so there are usually 5 fields in this syntax, represented default by 5 asterisks. So the first one represents minutes and allowed values are 0 to 59. Second one is hour, allowed values are 0 to 23. Third one is day of month and allowed value is 1 to 31. The next one is month, allowed values, as you have guessed right, 1 to 12. And then day of week. This is from 0 to 6 and it starts with Sunday and ends on Saturday. So let's see, you want to trigger a build on every Saturday. Every Saturday, the option that we have provided is a day of the week. So we'll be updating this particular field over here, day of the week. And you see Saturday is 6, number 6. So this is what we'll use. So over here in place of asterisk, it will be 6. And rest of the places it will be asterisks. So once you use this one over here like this, then it will trigger your build on every Saturday. All right, now let's go back and see a few more examples. So let's say you want to trigger your build on every Saturday but only at 11 PM at a certain time. So first you will use 6 for Saturday and then we have an hour of the day, right? 11 PM, which is this one. Because this is represented in 24 hours format, so we'll be using 23 over here as 11 PM, right? And for rest of the places, we'll use asterisk. So now this build will run on every Saturday at 11 p.m. at 2300 hours. Let's see one more example. If we want to trigger the build on every Saturday at 11:45 p.m. So we have one more condition added, which is minutes. So for Saturday, again 6. For 11 p.m. it is hour, and for 45 minutes this should be the first one. So Saturday 11:45 p.m. and for rest it should be star. I hope you have got it now and you could practice this more. You could understand the cron syntax better. I'll paste the link as well of the official cron page and you could just have a glance at it. There is one more thing that I want to discuss it with you before we move ahead. So let's say if you want to trigger build at every 5 minutes. So for that you have to use asterisk divide by n to every nth interval of time. What I mean by that is if you want to run your build at every 10 minutes, then you would use star divide by 10 and for rest of the places as asterisk. So for this example, if we want to run it for every 5 minutes, then it will be asterisk by 5. So this build will run at every 5 minutes with star and asterisk at the rest of the places. I hope this would be clear now. Okay, so this is how we could add the build periodically and use the syntax over here. Let's uncheck this one and let's see the other option, which is a GitHub webhook trigger and poll SCM. So webhook for Git SCM polling. Let's see how it works. So let's say you have Jenkins and your GitHub repository. So they are connected with each other through a webhook. Whenever a user pushes a code to the GitHub repository or generated any event like delete something or create a pull request, or we could choose the events that you want it to trigger the job for. Once the user perform that commit, then Jenkins will receive a push event from GitHub that something has been done, and Jenkins perform the one-time SCM polling. That means I've got the event. Now I'm gonna check out the repository because there has been a change in the repository. This is how Git SCM polling is done. Let's have a look and set it up on our GitHub repository. So first we'll go to the GitHub, go over here, settings, and then click over here, webhook, and add a new webhook. So you need to provide your payload URL over here. This is a webhook URL, which is something like this. So your Jenkins URL and then GitHub -webhook at the end. So let me just get my Jenkins URL from here till the port and replace it with this. Okay. Make sure you have the backslash at the end as well, else it will fail. Okay. Then I'll select the content type as application and JSON. And we have 3 options to choose from. If you want it just for the push event, send me everything. That means for every single activity on your GitHub repo, Jenkins will trigger the job. This is something that you wouldn't want. And the last one is this one, in which you can select the activities on which you would want Jenkins to do the SCM polling and trigger the job. So you could select basically pushes and pull requests and then hit over here, add webhook. And that should be it. This should be the simplest form. And if you go to your job now, you just have to select that option, which is this one, GitHub trigger for Git SCM polling. Click apply and save. Now we have only 2 builds over here and it's not triggering any build. We are not doing a manual trigger. However, let's simulate this with the help of a git push. So I'll go back to my repository and I'll add a new file, create a new file, give it a name and then enter some content, hit on commit new file. Once you do that and you go back to a Jenkins, you would see a job that has been triggered for you. So as soon as we made the change, instantly within few microseconds or within a couple of seconds, it triggered the job for you. And if you click on the job, go to console output, you will see it started by a GitHub push by my ID. So it will also tell you the event, how the event got generated, how the push was started, and who started it. That means who committed on the GitHub repository. So with this method, you wouldn't have to provide Jenkins access to your developer to trigger any job. They would just commit their changes to their deployment branch or their feature branch, and job will be triggered for them. Let's have a look at the next option, which is SCM polling. This is a little different from the Git webhook polling because it doesn't have a webhook. We have Jenkins and GitHub over here, and they are connected with a continuous SCM polling. That means Jenkins is continuously polling the GitHub repository for any changes. So whenever a user performs any code commit, Jenkins will receive a push event from GitHub because Jenkins is continuously polling to the GitHub. This is not the recommended method because it would increase the load on the server, on the SCM repository, because Jenkins is continuously polling it, and it would degrade the performance of the source code repository. So that is why it is not the recommended approach. But in case if you want to use it, that's how you use it. So you go to your job, click over configure section, and from the build trigger section, you select poll SCM. You can specify your schedule over here. So schedule over here would be like after how many seconds or how many minutes you would have to check for the changes. All right. This is similar to cron syntax. Again, if you want to poll it like every 1 minute, then you could use this sort of syntax and it will run for every 1 minute. If you wanted to poll the SCM for every 5 minutes, it will do this. The difference between this schedule and build periodically schedule is when you provide any schedule in the build periodically section, it will trigger the build at that time, whether or not there are new changes that has been committed or not. But this one over here, it will only check in the SCM whether there are changes. If there are any changes from the last poll, then only it will trigger the job, else it will skip the job trigger. First of all, let's try to understand the basics of distributed build and an example of how it is visualized, and then we'll discuss more about it. Let's say we have a Jenkins master running on a separate server, and we have a set of VMs hosted on Azure cloud. When we install Jenkins agent on each of those VM, those agents establish a bidirectional communication between the machine and the Jenkins agent using the TCP/IP protocol. The first server can be treated as a separate node, so let's call it node 1. And the same way, second server can be treated as node 2. The same way, let's say we have two Ubuntu based machines which are hosted on AWS cloud. Again, we can install Jenkins agent on each of those, and those Jenkins agents set up bidirectional communication with Jenkins master using the TCP/IP protocol, and we call it node 3 and node 4 respectively. The same way, we can have it installed on a on-prem server. Let's say this is the on-prem server that we have and Docker engine is already installed on it. And we install Jenkins agent on that machine to set up the communication with Jenkins master. And then Docker containers can be used as separate nodes. So this is the minimalistic Jenkins master slave architecture. Let's see how distributed builds actually work. Let's assume Jenkins has multiple tasks to be executed. Instead of running everything on Jenkins master itself, it distributes the workload among all the nodes that it has. So let's say task 1 can be assigned to node 1, task 2 can be assigned to node 2. So those two tasks will run on Windows based machine. Task 3 and task 4 will be assigned to node 3 and 4 respectively, and task 5 and 6 can be run on these Docker containers. So in this way, Jenkins distributed the workload among all the available agents and nodes, and it just manages those tasks and they report back the status and the logs to Jenkins master itself. It has lots of benefits and we'll discuss that in detail as well, but this is how distributed build work in Jenkins. So let's have a look at the distributed builds in more detail. Distributed builds run on nodes rather than the built-in Jenkins master node to increase the performance. Agent that runs on node manages the task execution on behalf of the Jenkins master. The Jenkins master manages these nodes to do the actual build work. Different nodes can run different operating systems and different tools, enabling one pipeline to build and test the same software for a variety of platforms and environments. All production Jenkins instances should run distributed builds. The standalone Jenkins installation, or if we are running Jenkins builds on the Jenkins master itself, it's not recommended for the production workload. This is just for the test purpose or just to execute a specific task. Let's have a look at the different type of distributed builds or different type of master slave architecture that we have. First one is single master multi-slave. Let's say we have a Jenkins master and there are multiple slaves attached to it. Slave 1, slave 2, slave 3. There can be thousands of slaves and they are connected with the TCP/IP protocol with the Jenkins master. So this is how single master multi-slave architecture looks like. Then we have the other type of architecture which is multi-master multi-slave. In this there are multiple master and multiple slaves. Each Jenkins master represents a project or a line of business. Let's say if we are in banking sector, so one Jenkins can be used to serve all the bills, all the projects within capital markets, and the other Jenkins can be served for all the projects in retail banking. Let's see the different benefits of using distributed builds. Scalability, which means agent can be added as required. Running builds on agents make the Jenkins instance more scalable. If you do not have enough resources to run your builds, just add more Jenkins agent. Otherwise, you will need to create an entirely new set of Jenkins masters to support the build. Then we have security. Running jobs on separate and isolated machines mitigate the risk of someone accessing the restricted data from Jenkins master. So jobs that run on a controller or a Jenkins master has full permission to all the Jenkins resources on the master node. For even greater security, you can use cloud agents or the Docker based agents that are created for each build and then destroyed when the build is over. This way, if a malicious agent taints the node or executor, no other build will be affected. Specialized nodes. This allows you to build and test on multiple operating systems and different CPU architectures while using different versions of JDK and other tools. Each node can be configured with only the tools that is needed for build and test to be run on it. For example, you might consider JDK 8 and Apache Maven on one Linux node or configure JDK 7 and Gradle on a Windows node. So tools are directly installed on the nodes. And you can also define Docker Kubernetes container that contain the required tools and are installed on the node itself. Pipeline then access this node by using a label that is configured for the node. One master can orchestrate thousands of builds a day by distributing the build load for better resource utilization. Let's have a look at the components of distributed build. So we have a Jenkins master where the actual Jenkins service is running. And then we have a node. Let's say this is hosted on a Windows based virtual machine. So this is node. When we install Jenkins agent on machine to set up the communication with Jenkins master using a TCP/IP protocol, this particular thread is called as agent, which actually executes the tasks. Then a virtual machine or a server can have multiple CPUs or multiple cores, and each CPU can be treated as a separate executor. If it has like 4 CPUs, so there are 4 executors in this particular architecture, and each executor can be used to execute a particular task, and we can run 4 tasks in parallel. So these are all the components of distributed build. First one is master. Jenkins master, or we can call it controller as well. This is the Jenkins service which acts as a brain and decide where, when, and how things needs to be done. It basically performs the management and admin tasks such as backup, login, role-based access control, etc. Then we have Node. They are the actual machines on which build agents run. Jenkins monitor resource utilization of each node, and a node is taken offline if any of these values go outside the configured threshold. Then we have executor. So it is a thread in the agent. The number of executor on a node defines the number of concurrent tasks that can be executed on that node at one time. Agents are the lightweight Jenkins instance that runs on different nodes. They manages the task execution assigned by Jenkins. Now let's have a look how we can create different nodes and install Jenkins agent on those to establish a bidirectional communication between Jenkins master and the nodes. So for that, let's do some prerequisite check to make sure we have everything in place. So first, go to manage Jenkins section over here. Make sure the Jenkins URL is correct in the place. So I'll go to manage Jenkins and then go to configure system. And if you scroll down a bit, you will see the Jenkins URL. Make sure it matches with the Jenkins URL that you have. So when you restart AWS EC2 instance, this public IP gets changed. So make sure you don't have any discrepancies like that. Then the next thing is you go back to the manage Jenkins again and you go to configure global security over here and scroll down a bit and make sure you have the agent communication port enabled. So this is the port on which Jenkins master will communicate with the agent. So it could be either fixed, random, or disabled. Okay, so I have set it as 50,000 fixed Jenkins port. Now let's go back to our EC2 console. So I have created two Ubuntu based servers, server 1 and server 2, and they both have that port 50,000 enabled. 50,000 is enabled, and the same is there in Jenkins master as well, because this will be bidirectional communication. So make sure you have it open for both the server as well as the master, right? So these were the prerequisites check. Now let's go to Jenkins homepage, and you see over here there are two options. One is a build queue. So if there is a build that is already running, it should be visible from here, and this is the build executor status. So build executor status is nothing but the number of executors that are available for the Jenkins master. So in this Jenkins server that I have, I don't have any agents running right now. So these executors are part of the Jenkins master. So in this Jenkins master, I have two executors, 1 and 2. And how we can check that? You could click over here, build executor status. Okay, and this is the Jenkins master. If I click over there, go to configure. So you see number of executors are 2. So if you remember in the previous slides, I have shown you the number of executors should be equal to the number of CPU cores. This is a best practice. So if I go back to my Jenkins master and scroll down a bit, so you see number of vCPUs are 4 in the Jenkins master. That means I can have 4 executor and that should be fine. That would not impact the performance of Jenkins. So let's just keep it 2 for now. Okay. And then I go back to the node section again and click on new node. I'll give it a name. Let's call it server 1. Enable this permanent agent box. Click OK. And now it will ask you different configurations. So name is server 1. I'll give the same description. Number of executor, it's again asking for the executor on the agent. By default it is 1, but we can set to a maximum of, we can set any number of executor, but it is recommended to set as per your vCPUs. So in my servers as well, like server 1 and 2, there are 4 vCPUs. So let's just keep it 4 executors over here. Then this would be remote root directory where all the Jenkins agent logs will be stored on the server itself. So I'll give it a path. It's called home Ubuntu Jenkins. And then I'll give this a label as well. Let's give the same label as the name of the agent. Now in usage, there are two options. Use this node as much as possible and only build job when label expressions matching this node. So this is really important. If you use this node as much as possible, that if you don't specify any agent in any of the job, it could pick any of the available agent. It could run the job on any of the agents that are available. So make sure you use this only build job with label expression. Only build job with label expressions matching this node. That means when we explicitly defines label server 1 on the job itself, only then it will trigger the job on this particular agent. Okay. Then we have launch method. So there are different launch method by which we can start our agent. First is by connecting it to the controller. That means we run a particular command and a jar file on the Jenkins slave machine on the Jenkins node, and then it will connect to the Jenkins master. The next is the other way around, which is you execute some command on the Jenkins master and it will connect to the Jenkins agent. And the third one is launch agent via SSH. So you establish a SSH connection, you share the public and private key, and it will authenticate you. So there is a problem with this approach via SSH. It's because, when you are working in a multinational corporation and enterprise level organization, direct SSH access to the servers are blocked. Sometimes you use a jump server or a Bastion host to log into a server. So if that is the case, then this method would not work. So that is why I won't recommend this. And the one that we'll be using is launch agent by connecting it to the controller. So I'll select this one and I'll keep the rest of the fields as default and click on save. Once you do that, so this will show you that you have created this node, but it is currently disconnected. There is no connection that has been established. So if I click on that, so it says you can connect agent to the Jenkins in one of these ways. So what we need to do over here is we need to copy this command and run it over the slave machine. Okay, so that it could establish a connection to the Jenkins master. And for that, we need this agent.jar file as well. So this is the agent, the lightweight Jenkins agent that will be running on that slave machine. So I'll click on that and download this file over here. And then using WinSCP or any other SCP client, I can transfer this to the server itself. So I'll just take the IP from here. Public IPv4 DNS, and then I'll paste it over here. I have already inserted the key over here. So if I go to edit settings and if I go SFTP, so I have already imported the .ppk file over here for the authentication. Okay, so I'll just have to provide the host name, username is Ubuntu, and port is 22 for SSH, and then I hit enter or quick connect. Then this is the connection is successful. This over here is the remote side. That means our server on which Jenkins agent will be installed. Okay, so I'll just transfer the agent.jar file over here. So this is over here in my local machine. I'll transfer it over here. Okay, it's been transferred. Now let's go back to that agent machine. I'll open a new putty session. Let me increase the font size as well. Okay. Disable the and paste the hostname over here. Hit enter. Login as Ubuntu. Now if I do ls over here, my agent.jar file is here. So let me just provide permissions to this file. Okay, and it's done. Now what I'll do, I'll copy the command from the server itself, which is this one, and make sure you run this in a background mode so that if you close this session, it will keep on running. So for that, I'll append ampersand at the end. Okay, and if you want to have a look at this command, so it has this is exploding that agent.jar file and the JNLP URL, this is the Jenkins URL which it would connect to. The secret is a one-time encrypted password generated by this, and this is the work directory. Before doing this, let me just create a work directory with the same path, which is home Ubuntu Jenkins, and I'll copy the agent.jar file to this directory. Okay, I'll just clear the screen again, and now I'll run this command and add ampersand at the end. Once I do that, it will show the agent as connected. And if you go back to your Jenkins screen and hit refresh, you see agent is connected. And let's go to the nodes again. You'll see one is the master node which is connected, then this is the server, and this will show you the detail of the agent node as well. So this is a Linux machine, and the clock difference, the time zone is in sync. This is the free disk space, this is the free time space. And over here now you'll see earlier it was just 2 executor for built-in node. Now there are 4 executor for this agent node as well. So this is what we have done so far, and there are few other things that you can do with this. So there is a node monitoring section. If you click on that, this is the threshold that you have predefined. So let's say if the free space on any of the nodes will go beyond 1 GB, then it will disconnect the node from the connection. Yeah, basically that's it. And I'll pause the video for a few minutes and I'll create another node for server 2 as well, following the same steps that we just did. All right, I have followed the same steps again, and this time I did it for server 2. So now I see the server 2 is also connected. And if you see at the build executor status, you see built-in node, server 1, 4 executor, and server 2, 4 executor. So that means we have installed our agent successfully. Now let's test if they are working fine or not. So I'll go back to my Jenkins dashboard and just create a sample job. Let's call it test agent. Select the freestyle project, click OK. So I'll basically just print a hello statement just to describe between both the jobs. So let's use restrict when this project can be run. So in the general section itself, there is an option restrict where this project can be run. So over here we are specifying where this project needs to be run. If I do that and provide label over here, let's call it server 1. Okay, so I have selected it to run on server 1 only. It won't run this build on any of the agent even though they are available because we have explicitly specified it over here. Okay, so let's just use a simple step, execute shell. I'll just simply run the Unix command hostname, so that will print the IP, hostname -i, apply and save. Now let's hit on build now. So this is done. Let's see the console output. So IP is 172.31.46 and 12. Let's just see if it is matching with the server 1 IP. So this is server 1. If I do hostname -i over here, this is 172.31.46.12, which is the same one. The same way we can run it on other agent to verify it, but this is how distributed build works. This is how you can set up master slave architecture in Jenkins. So there are some best practices also that you need to keep in mind. First is this I've already mentioned as well. You need to make sure that number of executor on Jenkins master itself is 0. So how you can check that? You go to this built-in node, click on configure and update this to 0. I have designed this tutorial keeping in mind the beginners to Jenkins pipeline. So we will start with the basic introduction of Jenkins pipeline, benefits of using it, syntax, difference between declarative and scripted pipeline, and benefits of using a Jenkins pipeline. Then we'll be doing a deep dive into declarative pipeline with the demo, which includes environment setup, agent installation, integrating your IDE with GitHub. Then we'll create a simple CI pipeline with Maven build and archive artifact stages using a demo application. Then we will use environment variables and parameters inside the pipeline. and also introduce parallel stages, when expression, and a complete CI CD pipeline using stash and unstash feature of Jenkins. At the end, we'll see how you can load an external Groovy script inside the pipeline and call its method externally. So please watch the video till the end as there'll be a lot more to it, and I'll be covering everything about Jenkins pipeline from a beginner to an intermediate level. A typical Jenkins pipeline or any CI/CD pipeline includes these common stages: code commit, code build, integration, testing, release, deploy, operate, followed by continuous feedback at all the stages. So Jenkins pipeline as a code is generally a tool and a process for defining your CI/CD flow as a code. Jenkins pipeline supports two syntaxes: declarative syntax and scripted syntax. Declarative syntax uses Groovy expression for flow control. However, scripted pipeline syntax uses a framework to control execution. Both syntax uses a customized DSL that is based on Apache Groovy to programmatically manipulate Jenkins object. The pipeline defines the entire continuous integration and delivery process as a code. Let's have a look at the benefits of using Jenkins pipeline. Pipeline code is generally placed at a central Git-based repository so that it can be version control and easy to track the changes. It is easy to migrate and maintain because everything resides as a code. Parallel task execution is possible instead of sequential tasks that was there in the freestyle jobs of Jenkins. We can also implement complex conditional logics, which was not possible in freestyle jobs. There is another advantage of using it, which is dynamic resource allocation and cleanup. Human intervention for manual approvals can be added to improve the security of the pipeline. Let's say you want someone to manually approve the pipeline before it actually deploys the code in your production environment. This is possible with the help of Jenkins pipeline. And it provides the functionality to resume at a certain point on failure. Let's have a look at the difference between declarative and scripted pipeline syntax. Declarative pipeline can always be resumed after an interruption, no matter what caused the interruption. However, scripted pipeline executes serially from top to down. Declarative pipeline requires only limited knowledge of Groovy syntax, and you can use your external scripts such as Bash script or Python or PowerShell inside your pipeline. However, scripted pipeline relies on Groovy expression for flow control, and extensive Groovy knowledge is required for that. It encourages a declarative programming model. Scripted is very flexible and extensible. Declarative reduces the risk of syntax errors. Scripted limitations are mostly Groovy based, and it provides a lot more functionalities than declarative pipeline. You can also use the script steps to include bits of scripted code within a declarative pipeline, only when you have needs that are beyond the capabilities of declarative syntax. Scripted pipeline works well for power users with complex requirement, but beginners to Jenkins pipeline can easily mess up the whole system, and most users do not need all the flexibility it accords, right? So based on the use cases, you choose whether you have to use declarative or scripted. So it's totally based on the use cases and the knowledge that you have. Like I said, declarative is easy to learn as it just uses the framework, and inside that framework you can use the scripting language of your choice. However, if you are going with scripted pipeline, you would have to use the Groovy syntax. Let's have a look at the basic syntax of Jenkins declarative pipeline. So main pipeline file is called Jenkins file by default, but you can also customize the name as per your choice. So everything resides inside a pipeline block. You can specify the agent on which pipeline needs to be executed. If you are using multiple agents in your pipeline, then you can specify this agent as none. And if you don't care about which agent to execute the pipeline on, then you can just specify this agent as any. But here in this example, I have specified agent with the label as Linux. So this pipeline will run on the agent that has the label as Linux. Pipeline is simply a collection of multiple stages which starts from the stages block, and then stage A, stage B, and there could be many more stages. And inside stage, you specify the steps which performs the actual task execution. These tasks could be a bash script, a Python script, PowerShell, Bash script, and many more. This is pretty much the basic syntax of a Jenkins declarative pipeline, but we will see many more complex examples with different pipeline features as we move forward in this video tutorial. Enough about the theory, let's get our hands dirty with the detailed demo about Jenkins pipeline. We'll try to cover each and every topic. If you had followed my tutorials till now, then you should have a Jenkins master already running either as a WAR file, as an RPM package, or as a systemctl service, or as a Docker container. Whichever method you might have used, it doesn't matter. You should have a Jenkins running as a prerequisite of Jenkins pipeline as a code tutorial. So make sure you have a Jenkins running already. If not, then follow the video. I'll put the link in the description section below as well. So as part of this tutorial, we'll be doing environment setup first. So we already have a Jenkins master running. Let's go ahead and provision dev environment as well as a production environment. So I'll go to the launch instances over here. I'll select the Ubuntu image from the list, this one. I'll keep everything as default, configure instance, and I'll add the user data script over here, which is this one. So what it will do, it will update the repository, then it will install 𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃11, which is required for Jenkins master and Jenkins slave communication. Then I'll also install Apache 2. This would act as a reverse proxy to host our website or web application. And I'll click on next. I'll use the default storage, next, and then configure security group. So make sure you have certain ports open, port 80 to host your website, port 8080, port 22 to SSH into the server, port 50,000 for Jenkins master and slave communication, and so on. So I'll use an existing security group that I already created, this one. And as part of this security group, I already have port 80, 8080, 22, 25 for SMTP, and 50,000 opened. So next, click on review and launch and hit launch. I'll select the key pair, which is this one, acknowledge, and launch instances. So I would need two instances, one for dev server and one for prod server. So let's go to this instance and I'll select this one. I'll just give it a name, dev server, hit save, and then I'll launch a new instance as well. So I'll click over here, image and templates, and launch more instance like this. It'll have all the details that we have already provided, including the security group and the user data. I'll just review everything quickly, hit on launch, use the same key pair, hit launch instances. Go over here. Once it is done, let's wait for a few seconds. And this one was our dev server. This was already created, and I'll just update this as prod server. So I'll go over here, take the public DNS, put it over here, and Apache page should be visible, which means our user data script has been executed successfully. So this one is for dev server and the other one should be for prod server. Let's verify this one as well. Okay, so it is up now. So that means our environment setup has been done. So we have a Jenkins master, a dev server, and a prod server running. Now, as part of the next step, I'll be installing Jenkins agent on both the server dev as well as prod. So I'll go to build executor status over here, click on new node on the left, give it a name, dev server. Okay. And then I'll put the same description over here. I'll put number of executor as 2. So all the details about this I have already provided in the tutorial where I have installed Jenkins agent. So please make sure you go through that if you haven't already. If you did, then just follow along. So I'll be going through this section very quickly because I have already explained this. Ubuntu Jenkins. Then I'll give it a label. I'll give the same label and I'll select this option. Then I'll use the default option launch agent by connecting it to the controller. I'm not using SSH for a specific reason and I've already explained that in the video. Then I'll use rest of the settings as default. I'll hit save. Okay, I'll create one more agent for prod server. Hit on new node again. Give it a name, prod server. And then this time I'll copy it from the existing dev server because I don't want to put the settings again. Hit OK. And all the details have been imported from the dev server. So I'll just quickly make some changes. Description prod server and label as well prod server. Hit on save. Okay. So now when I do this, let's go to dev server first. I have these options to run the agent from the command line. So first I'll download the agent.jar file from here, and then I'll transfer this jar file to the dev server and run this command over there. So now I'll use a file transfer utility such as FileZilla or WinSCP. So I have FileZilla already. So I'll open that. I'll copy the public DNS of the dev server. Okay. I'll put it over here, port 22, and username is Ubuntu. I've already imported the key. Quick connect, it is connected. Now I'll create another folder in this and transfer the agent.jar file from what I've downloaded to the server itself. So I have drag drop from here to here. Okay, file has been transferred. Now I'll open the putty session, hit on new session, put the host name. Okay, I'll log in as Ubuntu. Clear the screen. So I have transferred the agent.jar file in the dev server itself at this path, home Ubuntu Jenkins. So if I do ls over here, I'll see my agent.jar file over here. So in order to connect this server to the Jenkins master through JNLP agent, I just have to now run this command. I'll copy the command from here and I'll paste it over here. Make sure you add ampersand at the end so that it will run in the background and the process would not crash even if you close your SSH shell or even if it is crashes. So your Jenkins agent will still be connected to the Jenkins masters. So make sure you add this ampersand at the end. Now I hit enter. And if everything is good, you should see this status as connected over here. So I'll hit enter over here and I'll go back to my page and hit refresh. This agent will be connected now. I'll perform the same step to connect a prod agent as well. So I don't have to download the agent.jar file again because this will be the same file that I've already copied. So I'll just copy the prod server public DNS IP from here. Paste it over here, put port number as well. Okay, it is connected now. Now I'll copy the agent.jar file. Okay, it is connected now. Now I have to open the shell again, hit new instance. Okay. Ubuntu, and I'll clear the screen. Then I'll create a new directory. I'll copy the agent.jar file from here to Jenkins. And then I'll cd to Jenkins and I should rename this first. So move agent.jar I'll remove all the special characters and blank spaces. Should be good now. I'll go back to the previous directory and I'll remove this agent.jar, and also I'll provide permissions to this directory recursively. Okay, should be good now. Go back to the same directory. Okay, now I go back to my prod server node, copy the command again, paste it over here, add %, at the end, hit, and boom. This should be connected now as well. Agent is connected. And over here, if I hit refresh, agent is connected. Go back to my Jenkins homepage and I'll now see both the agents are active now. So it is ready to execute the command provided by Jenkins master. Now, as part of the setup as well, we'll be installing an IDE so that we could make our code changes in that and integrate in real time with GitHub repository. So you could use an IDE of your choice, or you can follow me along. So I'm using Visual Studio Code, which looks something like this. So the installation steps are pretty simple. You go to google.com and then just type download Visual Studio Code, hit the first link, and here you have different options to choose it from. So you could use a Windows based, Ubuntu based, or Mac OS. So you can hit download. I've already downloaded it, so I won't be doing it again. So this is how it will look like. So once you have downloaded the VS Code installable, you should just double click it to install it as any executable you would do in Windows. So just accept that agreement, click on next, 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 install, and this should be fairly quick. Okay, so once it is installed, hit finish. And once it is installed, this would be the screen that will be presented to you. Then you go over here on the left side, you'll see something as extensions. Click over there and search for GitHub extension. So I'll search GitHub, and this is the one that you should be installing, GitHub pull request. Make sure you are installing the official extension by GitHub. So verify the publisher name over here and you should be good. Once you install this, I've already installed it before, so it is visible as this. So once you install it, you go to source control over here and click on clone repository. Then it will show you this drop down. Hit over here, clone from GitHub. And it says the extension GitHub wants you to sign in using GitHub. So click over allow and it will open a page wherein you have to authorize yourself as a valid GitHub user. So hit continue. And then authentication would be successful. A token will be stored temporarily in your Git credential manager. And then all the remote repositories on which you have access to will be presented to you over here. So I'll clone this repository, simple Java Maven app. This is the one that we'll be using for this particular demo. So I'll click over here and I'll choose a location in my local drive to clone the repository. So I already had this clone before, so I'll delete it and I'll use the same folder. And I'll use the same folder to clone it. So I'll hit select repository location and it says cloning repository. And would you like to open the clone repository? I'll open it. Once you do that, it will add that repository that you have downloaded into your local workspace. So this is your local workspace now. It has these folders and these many files. To make a change in any file, to push or pull the change, what you will do is you would just select the file. Let's say we'll just update the readme file and I'll add one more line after this. This is test. Okay, I'll do this. I'll do a Control S to save this. And now you will show there is one change showing in your source control tab. So I'll click over here, source control, and here is your file that's been changed. So there are few stages to push the change from your local IDE to your remote repository. First, you have to stage the changes. So to stage the change, there are different options: discard the change, open the file, or to stage the change. So this is the one that we'll be clicking on. So I'll hit stage changes. Okay, so this is now staged. Now next is to commit the change. To commit the change, I'll hit over here, commit, and I'll provide a message. Test changes, hit enter, and the change has been committed to the local repository. Now the next step is to push the change to the remote repository. To do that, you see there is like at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of the tool, you would see one, that means one change is yet to be committed to the remote repository. So I'll just click over there and the change will start syncing. So once you do that, you see it's been completed and you don't see anything over here. Now let's go back to the remote Git repository to see if it already been updated. So I'll go to my project, I'll hit refresh, and the readme file we updated. So you see the change 44 seconds ago. And if you open the file, so this was the change that we just did. And now you know how you can integrate your IDE with your GitHub. So now that we have cloned the remote GitHub repository into our IDE, we'll start working on it. So this project is like a simple Java app. So if we go to src and app, you'll see app.java. This is just a hello world type application. It will print hello world message on the browser. Just go back. And there is a 𝗏𝗺.xml in which there are all the dependencies and plugin details mentioned. So this should be good. And now we'll go back to our Visual Studio Code and go to the Explorer. So let's create our first Jenkins file. So if you remember my previous lecture about declarative Jenkins pipeline, everything resides inside the pipeline block. So I'll open the pipeline, and then inside that you could specify options, agents, and different other things. So for now, I'll just keep it simple because this is our first pipeline. I don't want you to be overburdened with a lot of information. So let's just keep it simple. So I'll put agent as none so that it won't run on any agent, and we can explicitly specify agent on different steps. Then everything would be there in stages. There could be multiple stages. So our first stage, let's call it build stage. And then there are steps. So steps are the actual tasks which is performed by the Jenkins stage. So let's see, echo. This is build stage. Okay. So this is our first stage. If you want to have multiple stages in a pipeline, so you could define the same using the same syntax. Let's do build test and then steps again. This is test stage. And then we have one more. Let's call it build, test, and deploy. Steps again. And echo. This is deploy stage. So it looks good. So let's do a quick recap what's been done so far. So pipeline is the main block which holds everything together. Okay, then we could specify agent as none, or we could provide any agent name, or we could just say agent as any. This should also work. So let's keep it this way. Then we have stages. Stages encapsulate all the stages together in a pipeline. There could be sequential stages and parallel stages. We'll see parallel stages later on. But over here, these are the sequential stages which will be executed one by one. So first, the build stage will be executed. It will go inside the steps. And these are the actual steps that will be performed by this stage. The same way, once this is completed, the next stage will be triggered, which is test stage. And steps would perform the actual action, which is printing this is test stage on the screen. Then the same way deploy stage will be triggered. So if any of the stage failed, the pipeline will terminate itself then and there, and rest of the stages will not be continued. Right, so I'll just click on save. I'll hit Control S, go to source control and push the changes. First Jenkins file, enter, and then push the change. I'll create a new item, and this time I'll select the job type as pipeline. So if this option is not visible over here, make sure you have pipeline plugin installed. So go to the update Jenkins, and so go to manage plugins and install the pipeline plugin, and this would be visible if it's not already there. So I'll just give this a name, test pipeline, select pipeline, hit OK. Now I'll keep everything as default other than the Git URL. So there are two options to run the pipeline. Either you could just put your pipeline script over here, or you could use a SCM like GitHub. So I'll select pipeline script for SCM, this one, and then it will ask me SCM type. It is a Git based, and the repository URL. So repository URL, I get it from here. I'll go back to my project, click over here, code, SSH, copy, I'll paste it over here. Now I'll select my credentials. Error is gone now. Okay. And the default name of the Jenkins file is this one. So make sure you have the Jenkins file on the root folder of the Jenkins, on the root folder of the repository. But in our case, if we go back over here, you see Jenkins file is there inside the Jenkins folder, right? So make sure you update that detail over here. So this is our absolute path for the Jenkins file. Okay, so there is a small J on the root folder. Okay, I'll hit apply and save. Now let's see if it works. I'll click on build now. So if you go to this pipeline, it says obtain Jenkins file from this repository, from this particular path that we specified. First is node. We specified node as any. I'm not sure if there are any agents that are running. Okay, so my agents are down and my master doesn't have any executor. So for the timing, I'll just update the master to 1. So I'll go to manage nodes and clouds over here, built-in node, configure, and I'll update the executor to 1 because we don't have any other agents running. So for this demo, I'll just update it to 1 and I'll revert it later on. And as soon as we updated it to 1, it started that job, and it might have completed already. Let's see. So this was our pipeline, and you see this is success. If we click on that and hit on console output, you'll see all the details, all the actions that it performed. First, it downloaded the Jenkins file from the remote repository. Then it was waiting for the executor to be available because we didn't have any available executor. When we updated the master executor to 1, then only it picked up the job, and then it started running on the Jenkins workspace. Then it initialized the workspace. Then it cloned the GitHub repository. It downloaded the project, and then it triggers the pipeline. It says the first stage, this is build stage, this is test stage, and this is deploy stage. So these were all the messages that we intended to print as part of our pipeline execution, and this is what it did. If we go back to the pipeline, you will see this view as well. It will show you some other details like this is green because it was completed, else it would have been red over here. And it will show you the time that each stage took. So they were in milliseconds, and the average time for the full run. I hope this is making some sense now. Let's move ahead. Now that we have seen the basic structure of Jenkins pipeline, let's go ahead and start the agent that is running on a dev server so that we could offload the work from our Jenkins master to dev server. So I'll open the Jenkins in a new tab. I could go from manage Jenkins or just hit this node over here, dev server. Says the connection was broken. It was because I shut down the server. I'll just copy this command from here, and I've already logged in to my server. This was the SSH that I did. So let's go into the directory where agent.jar file is there. It was there in the Jenkins directory, I suppose. Yes, there it is. So I've copied the command, pasted it here, and added an ampersand at the end to run it in the background. Once I hit enter, it will start the agent. The info message over here shows it is connected. So I'll go back to my Jenkins page. Now if I hit refresh, my agent is connected and it is ready to serve the workload. Okay, so now I'll go back to my Jenkins pipeline over here. So earlier we did agent as any. Now we'll provide this a label. So sometimes if you are a beginner to Jenkins file, this syntax could be a bit confusing, but don't worry about it. It is really easy to remember and you could generate it yourself as well. I'll show you how you can do it. So let's go back to your Jenkins, and where you have your Jenkins pipeline over here on the last tab, you'll see pipeline syntax. So this is where you could generate your pipeline syntax. So I'll just open this in a new tab. So this is basically a snippet generator. There are two options. Snippet generator, this is for scripted pipeline. There are different options that you could choose from. And then there is a declarative pipeline as well. So if I click over here, declarative directive generator. So these are the basic syntaxes. So let's say we need to specify which agent to use when to execute a step. So earlier we did agent as any. So agent is the sample directive that we chose here, and type is run on any. And when I hit generate declarative directive, this is what we used already, right? But now we want it to run on a certain agent. So I'll hit over here, check the label, run on agent machine matching a label, and provide the label name. So let's see, our agent name was dev server. So I'll provide the same label name over here, dev server, and now click again and it will generate this syntax for me. So I'll just copy this and I'll go back to my Jenkins file and paste the content over here. So this is what we needed, right? Same way like the steps that we have already generated. If you see, there are options for these as well in the sample directive. See, stages. Then you could add multiple stage. Let's say build stage, and this is stage will contain step. Let's add a step as well, and you can add multiple stages. So stage 2 was test, and that's it. Hit over generate directive. So you'll see this is similar to what we already have. Stages, then stage, build, then step. Over here we could mention our task, and then stage, test, step, and the same way. So this is pretty simple. Okay, so now we have this. We have specified to run this pipeline on the dev server. Now we'll provide the actual build command. So instead of this echo statement, we'll provide a shell script. So this is nothing but a simple Maven command, which is Maven clean package to compile the code and to build the jar file. Okay, so this stage will now build our package. I'll just remove the rest of the stages for now. So this is stage deploy test. I don't need this right now. So I'll remove it. Now we'll add one more post condition inside this. So to check it, declarative generator. So you see post stage or build condition, and you select the condition in which you want to trigger this post stage. So post stage is associated with the stage itself, and it will run based on a certain condition. So let's say you want to run on post only if the stage is successful. Then you select that option. So for that, it would be this one, run if the build stage is success. You could select multiple options as well. Okay, hit this and I'll just copy this step from here. And you could select failure status as well, or aborted, failure, or unstable. There are like a lot of options you can choose from. So I'll go back to the Jenkins file, and inside the same stage after the steps, I'll add the section that I've just copied from the declarative syntax generator. So this is the post action. Okay, so this is a post message success, and I'll just keep it here. Okay, and over here I'll just put the archive artifact command to basically archive the artifact generated by this particular process. So I have it handy over here. I'll just copy this. This particular post build action, what it will do, it will check if the status is success of this particular stage. If it is success, then it will run this command archive artifact to archive the artifact that was generated inside the target directory. And this is Jenkins workspace **. So Jenkins workspace, then target directory, and inside that whatever war file is generated, it will archive that artifact to be used later in the pipeline. So when you run the pipeline again with the stage that has a deployment step, so you can use this particular artifact to deploy the file instead of compiling it again. So this is again a simple Jenkins file with just one stage which will build the package, and it will archive that package to be used later by the pipeline. So once I do that, I'll just save the changes and I'll just update it. And I'll just push the changes, build an archive, enter and sync it. Let's just verify our changes. Okay, our changes are here. Let's go back to our pipeline and run the pipeline again. Build now. And now it says Maven command not found. Make sure you have the tool installed and it is referenced inside the pipeline as well. So we did install the tool. So if you go back to Jenkins over here, manage Jenkins, and then global tool configuration. And if you go down, so I'll hit Maven installation. So our Maven is set to install automatically for this particular version. So we need to specify this Maven installation in a Jenkins file. Let's go back to the pipeline syntax generative. Hit on declarative directive generator and then select tools from here and then add Maven. Now it will show you which version of Maven you could use. So there is one that's been installed already. So hit generate directive and copy this. Go back to your Jenkins file, add this option before stages, and then save the changes and just push the changes. Tools to the pipeline, hit enter, sync the changes. And now it should be able to find the Maven installation. So let's go back to our test pipeline. So let's use a web application project instead of a command line project. So I'll just go back to my repository. I guess this was the one. Okay, it has a web app and index.jsp file. Let's use this one instead of the main one. So I'll copy it from here, configure it, update this one. Okay. And let's check out this project instead of the other one. Clone from GitHub and use the repository Maven project, this one. I'll use the same repository. Add to workspace. So it'll add another folder to the workspace. Let's initialize the repository. Right now there are two folders, one that we've created previously and another, this is the new one. So I'll just copy the Jenkins file that we already created for this one, and I'll replace the one that is there in Maven project. So Maven project is the one that we will now work with. All right. So this is, I'll just close this one. Remove folder from workspace. Okay, this should be good now. Okay, now let's just update the changes, save all and commit. Okay, and let's push the changes. Okay, let's see if Jenkins file is updated. Right, Jenkins file has latest details. Okay, so now we are using a var file based project instead of a jar file. Let's go to our test pipeline again and click on configure and update the Jenkins file location, because earlier we used to have the Jenkins file inside a subdirectory called Jenkins, but now because we have updated the project, we'll be using a different project now, and for that the Jenkins file is in the root directory itself. Let's verify that. So if we go to that, so this is the project that we are using and Jenkins file is over here in the root directory itself. So I'll use that, hit apply and save, and let's build it now. Click on console output. Okay, because we have changed the project, that is why it is installing the Maven again. And now you see it's archiving the artifacts and the status is success. So what it did, it says building war file. So war file has been built, Maven project, server web app, these status is success and hence the stage is successful. And then as part of the post build action, it archived the artifacts. So if we click over here to the test pipeline, now you'll see you have a webapp.war file generated. Now this war file, you could just click over here and it will be downloaded for you, or this artifact is available for rest of the pipelines as well. And if you can verify it from the backend as well, you go to this, the same folder target, clear the screen. I'll have to go back. Okay, now it's not in the target, but it's there in web app. Web app and target. And here you see your webapp.war file. So this is what we needed. All right. Now in this section, we'll see how we can use environment variables and parameters inside the Jenkins file. So to use the environment variables, it's pretty simple. Use this environment. It's basically a key value pair. So I'll give name equal to 𝗵𝗺. Okay, and then you can just use it with dollars. I'll just add an echo statement over here. Go hello $name, and it will print my name over here with the help of the environment variable. The next is parameter. So parameter is also simple, but let's generate it with the help of a syntax generator. So I'll go back to my pipeline. By the way, this is this URL over here. I'll provide this in the description section as well. This is really important. So it'll have a lot of details about all the different type of sections inside the Jenkins pipeline, how you can use that syntax and everything. So keep it handy with you. This is really important. Okay, so I'll go back to my pipeline over here, hit on pipeline syntax, declarative, and then select parameters from here. So there are different type of parameters that you could use. So, and the difference between parameter and variable is variable you can use inside the pipeline and you cannot update it at the runtime, while parameters can be updated at runtime. All right. So you could use a Boolean parameter, choice parameter, credential, file, password, run, string, anything. So I'll just basically use a simple string parameter. I'll give it a name, call it last name, default value. This would be my last name. So I'm using this and I'll hit this one. Okay. So this has been generated. Copy this. Go back to my Jenkins pipeline, and inside the pipeline block after the agent, I'll just paste this parameter. Okay. So this is how we have initialized environment variables. This is how we have initialized parameters. And to use parameter inside your build, you use this syntax, which is basically dollar and then params dot and the name of the parameter, which is last name. All right. Let's save it and see if it works. Let's go back to our pipeline and run it. Let's see if it's okay. Yeah, it's been done. Let's run it now. Okay, so it says hello 𝗙𝗪𝗀𝗧𝗃 𝗧𝗧. So this was the variable that we've used. This was the parameter. And now when you go to the pipeline again, now instead of the build option, it will show you build with parameters. And when you click over there, it will ask you the value of the last name, because we have used it as a parameter and the default value was this. We could update the default value over here. All right. And when you build it, it will use this value as the parameter value. I hope this is clear now. Let's move on to our next section. In this section, we'll see how we can run stages in parallel instead of running it sequentially. So let's add one more stage after the build stage, which is stage test. Let's say we have a requirement wherein we need to run test on multiple servers, and to save the execution time, we can run it parallelly because it has no impact, right? So I'll just do this stage test A, then we specify parallel stage test A. I mean, that needs to be run on one machine. I'll do it echo statement. This is test A. And then there is one more stage, which is test B. Echo. This is test B, and this needs to be run on the second machine. So this stage is closed here, this is closed here, this parallel is closed here, and this stage is closed here. So this is good. And now we would want this post build action to be triggered only when the tests are passed. That means these stages are passed. So let's copy this post action from here. I'll just cut it from here and paste it after this stage. So this will be part of this test stage. And once these two stages are finished and successful, only then this post build action will be performed. So this stage test is the parent stage, and test A and test B will be the nested stage, which would run in parallel with each other. And these should be inside steps. So if you see the previous format, it was stages, stage, and then steps. So stage and then steps. So I'll put this statement over here, and the same way steps. Okay. Now I'll save the changes. Right. Okay, let's go back to our pipeline and run it again. Okay, so it's building the package, and then so this was test A, test B, and how would you make sure that it ran in parallel? So you see parallel branch test A, test B, that means they ran in parallel. There is one more thing which you can check it from. So what you can do is you can install this cool plugin which is called 𝗏𝗡𝗏. You might have heard of it if you have ever worked with Jenkins or if you are a Jenkins aspirant. So you go to your plugin manager, search for the available 𝗏𝗏𝗏. Okay, install this. Okay, there are a lot of dependent plugins with it, so it will take few minutes, I guess, and wait for it. It's a success. There are some failure messages. All right, so I'll go to my pipeline and I'll hit refresh, and now I see over here another option, that is open 𝗏𝗏𝗏. So if I click over there, so this is again a nice UI. The other one is classic Jenkins, and you can switch from this version to the previous version from here. You see it says go to classic. So if you click over there, you would go to the previous version. So let's click it and let's go to the latest run that was there. Okay, so there are different options: pipeline, changes, test, artifacts. So this artifact was generated, and this is the pipeline log as well. So if I go to pipeline, I don't see anything because it's not been installed, I guess. Okay, it says it might require Jenkins restart. Let's see if the restart would work. I'll just log in. I'll go to test pipeline, go to the latest run, click open 𝗏𝗏𝗏, and yeah, now I see the details. Okay, so basically it has these many stages. So first was build stage, then it was test stage. So you see the parallel lines for test A and test B. That means they ran in parallel and it was part of this stage test. So first build was triggered. If you click over there, you'll see these were the steps and these were the std out messages generated from it. It won't show you the debug details unless it is specified, but here you'll see the standard messages. All right, and this was the print statement as well. And for test A and test B, the same way we printed this. This is test A and this is test B. It provides some additional functionalities on top of Jenkins, and like the nice enhanced UI is one of the feature people use it. Okay, so if you see this, it will be easier to understand the flow of pipeline. When we'll progress this tutorial further, and when we add more stages, when we make this a complex pipeline, then you'll see this 𝗏𝗏𝗏 will be really helpful for you to understand the pipeline flow. Now let's take this pipeline a step further. We'll be adding the deployment steps now, and we'll be looking into some more advanced features such as stash and unstash, choice parameter, deployment to dev, deployment to prod, and how we can use when expression to trigger a particular stage or to disable a particular stage. Let's have a look. So this is a Jenkins pipeline. Now instead of the string parameter, this was just for the test purpose. We'll add some more meaningful parameter over here. Let's add a choice parameter which will ask if you want to deploy on dev or prod. So again, you don't need to remember the syntax. Let's go to the pipeline. and we have pipeline syntax directive generative over here. So I'll select the parameter options and choose the choice parameter. Give it a name. Let's call it select environment. Add the choices over here. So I'll add two choices, dev and prod, and hit generate directive. Okay, just copy this from here, or just copy this line because you already have that parameter line, and replace the value over here. Right. So we have added a choice parameter which will ask before triggering the pipeline whether you want to deploy in dev or prod. Then in the build stage, we'll add one more step, which is because by default, if we use this command maven clean package, it will run the test cases as well. So we'll be skipping the test cases using the dskip equal to true, like this parameter over here. And I'll remove this one as well. So I just added this parameter to skip the test cases, and in our maven test cases over here, we'll be adding the command to run the test cases, which is simply this command sh maven test, and I'll copy the same in test b as well. So this command will run the actual test using the test cases that we have written, and that is the part of our repository. Okay, but now to run these test cases, we need an environment, an agent, which will execute the test cases. So I'll run this, both the stages in dev server. So I'll add this line over here, simply agent label is dev server, and I'll add the same over here as well in stage 2. Because these two stages are inside the parallel stage, so make sure you should not be adding that agent step over here in the parent stage. Instead, it will be there in the child stages like we have added. Now, the next step is, so we have built the code, we have packaged it, we ran the test cases, and then we archive the artifacts. So instead of using archive artifact, we can also use another Jenkins pipeline feature, which is stash and unstash. So stash is something that will download the copy of your artifacts in a temporary cache location, and then you can unstash the same in a different server as well. So let's say you have created your build on server A, you package the code, and then you stash the code in server A, and when you run unstash command in server B, it will just simply transfer your artifact from server A to server B. I'll show you how it will look like. So instead of this command over here, I'll replace this with this command. So directory, like this is an Apache syntax to change the directory. So this command will run inside this particular directory, web app target. So this is the directory where our war file will be generated as part of the build inside the Jenkins agent. So the complete path would be Jenkins workspace, web app, and target. Jenkins workspace, we don't have to mention it explicitly. It will be there already. And then the syntax of stash is stash name maven build. So you can give this a unique name, and then you can define the condition. So it includes only the var files that is there in this particular directory. So you have stashed it over here. All right. Now the next command is, once you have stashed it, we have to unstash it somewhere. So to do that, I'll add one more stage. So let's see where this stage is ending. This is stage test. I'll create a new stage. I'll call it deploy dev. Right. I'll add a when expression as well. So we don't want this stage to run on every condition. It should only run when we have selected the choice parameter as dev. So this is the syntax how you can use a when expression before you start the stage. Okay, so when expression, and then inside this expression curly braces, you can write your expression like params dot our parameter name was select environment equal to dev. So whenever this condition satisfies, I'll add one more condition as well, which is before agent true. So before agent is something that will, like as the name suggests, it will check this when expression before it actually triggers the agent. Let's say I'll just add the agent over here, which is agent label as dev server. But if we use this expression over here before agent is true, it will first evaluate the condition. If this when expression is true, only then it will check for the agent. So this step is really important. Okay. Now we have added the agent as well. Now let's start our steps. So like we did stash, we'll be now doing unstash. So we'll be changing the directory to var www html. This is the default directory where our Apache web pages will be served from. Okay, and inside this directory we'll be doing unstash, and then we'll provide the name of the stash file. Like over here we used Maven build, so I'll copy the same and I'll paste it over here. So it's pretty simple. We stashed it somewhere from a directory from a particular agent. It could be any agent, it could be Jenkins server, it could be dev server, prod server, any build server. And then we unstashed the same files, the same artifact on a different server like this. Okay, because we are using Apache web server over here, it would not auto explode the war file. We have to explicitly add the steps over here. So for that, I'll just simply write a few Unix commands or a small shell script. So I'll just go to the same directory www html, and then I'll run the command jar xvf webapp.war. So this will explode the war file in the same directory, and I'll close the sh over here. So this is done. Our steps are closed over here, stage is closed over here. This is for the main stages and this is for the pipeline. Okay, this looks good till now. Okay, I'll just simply commit the changes to our master branch. Okay, let's quickly verify the changes from GitHub. It just got updated. Let's see if our changes are there. So this is there, should be good. We'll be doing one more step. So because this stage will deploy to the dev environment, we'll be first logging into the dev server, which is this one for me. And I'll go to Apache directory, etc Apache 2. And over here, there'll be a file apache2.conf. Just vi this file with sudo command. Okay, and search for module. Okay, I don't find anything. So go to the end of the file. In like you could use the editor of your choice. I am comfortable with Vim, so that is what I am using. So go to the end of the file in insert mode and add these lines over here. Okay, so Apache 2 by default it takes index.html as the home page. For this particular application we had index.jsp. So over here I'm mentioning that wherever it will find index.html or index.jsp, it will take that as the default home page inside the var www.html directory. Alright, so I'll just save the file and I'll quickly do a Apache restart. systemctl restart Apache 2 should be good. Okay, now I'll run the pipeline. So I'll again go back to the classic mode. Okay, if I do build with parameter, our changes will not be reflected here like the choice parameter because this pipeline hasn't downloaded the latest source code from GitHub yet. So let me just quickly build it and I'll just cancel it right away. Cancel this. Okay, it should have downloaded the Jenkins file. Okay, it had downloaded the Jenkins file. So let's go back to the pipeline again and do build with parameter now. Now you see the choice parameter that you have added. All right. So I'll use this one dev and click on build. Let's see what happens now. So I'll open the console output. Let's open this in Blue Ocean. And let's just follow along. So it is building. It did Maven build. And let's see if this is running the test cases now. So here it is running the shell script of test cases. All right. So test cases have been executed and it deployed it to dev. Let's see the steps that it followed for the dev deployment. First, it checked it out from the version control. Then it uses the tool Maven and then it fetches the environment variable. It restored the previously stashed file. This is the step that we have added. And also in build, you would see something like stash. Okay, it is not there because it was part of the post step. So going back again. Okay, so yeah, so it restored the previously stashed file, and then inside this particular folder, it exploded the war file. And let's see if deployment was successful or not. So I'll just copy the dev server public IP DNS, this one, and I'll just open this in a new tab. And this is our application, Hello World version 2. This is what we had in our index.jsp. Now that we are comfortable with running CI CD pipeline till dev environment, let's go ahead and add the step for prod deployment as well. So I'll go back to my pipeline again. Okay. Over here, after the deploy dev, I'll add one more stage. Let's call it deploy prod. And I'll just copy everything from here and I'll make the changes inside that. Copy from vent till here. Right, so instead of select environment equal to dev, it should be prod, and then label should be prod server. So this is the agent that should be running on the prod server itself, and rest of the steps should be same. But again, we have to make one more change to the apache.conf file, like the way we did with the dev server itself. Okay, we'll do that shortly after we're done making changes to this Jenkins file. So I wanted to also show you one more thing. So like we are writing arbitrary scripts over here, like shell scripts and everything over here, we could create a shell script and put that in our same GitHub repository and just execute the script with the name over here. Okay, that's one way. The other way is we could just write external Groovy scripts, and the same way we can load the script in our Jenkins file. I will show you how we can do that. So let's create a new file first. In the same directory, in the same root directory, I'll create one file. Let's call it script.groovy, right? And I'll paste this content over here. So it will just create one hello method with the content. This is the message from Groovy script. And let's inside the build stage itself, let's add one more script. So script is something arbitrary script that you could write over here, or you could just load external Groovy file. You could also write your scripted pipeline logic over here. This is the same way. Okay, so I'll just write file equal to load and then the name of that Groovy script, script.groovy. Okay, equal to load script.groovy, and then inside the file there was a hello method. So you see this method name was hello. So I'll just call it file.hello. So I'm calling this method. So over here, before this clean package, before making the build, it should print hello. This message is from the Groovy script, like this. Okay, I'll add one more line just to differentiate. I'll add some asterisks. Okay, this is done. Okay, also because we are doing prod deployment over here, we need to make sure that someone is not triggering the prod deployment accidentally. We need to make sure that production deployment was approved and it was not triggered by someone accidentally. So we'll add an approval stage as well. So inside the deploy prod over here, we'll add this step which says input message is deployment approved. If this is approved, only then the below would be triggered, else it will be aborted. And by default, it will hold the build for 5 days. If it is not approved till then also the pipeline will be aborted. This particular task, sometimes there are many tasks like this one and there are few more which is not present in the directive generator over here. So if you click over here, you won't see this. In that case, this particular URL is your friend. So I'll share this URL link in the description section as well. So you'll find all the different things that we have discussed over here. So in this case, this is input step. All right, so input step is message, should we continue, okay, and submitter name, and so on, right? So you could search on this page whatever you need, it'll all be there. All the different things that we have discussed like agent post, stages, environment, options, parameter, triggers, everything would be here in this page as well, right? So make sure you bookmark this page and you follow this page all along. All right, so we'll go back to our Jenkins pipeline over here. Okay, so these steps have been performed, done. Let's save these changes. Please save it and commit both the files in our Git repository. Final pipeline. I'll push the changes. Let's see if our changes are visible. It's a good practice to verify the changes before you trigger the build, just to make sure you are not wasting any time. So it says script.groovy is here and then our Jenkins file is also updated. So this should be good. Now we'll be making the other change, which is updating the apache.conf file. So I've logged into my prod server over here. So I'll go to the directory etc apache2. I'll locate the file apache2.conf. It's a good practice to make a backup before making any change to any of the Unix file because the changes are irreversible. So I always make sure that I make a backup of the file before making any changes. BKP, I'll give it date as well, 17th March 2022. Okay, so I have my backup right over here in case if I need to revert the changes. So I should have the backup, right? So I'll do a VI on this file and I add these contents over here. So I'll go to end of the file and I've added these 3 lines at the end. Right, should be good. Now let's go back to our Jenkins pipeline and this time we'll trigger it for prod deployment. Here is a pipeline. Exit. Build with parameters. Let's select prod this time. Hit build. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is running. Let's go to Blue Ocean. Okay, it says build is completed, test cases are running. So these are running parallelly. So if you see, dev deployment stage has been skipped because we have selected deploy prod. Okay, and before doing the deployment, it is asking for the approval, whether to click on proceed or abort the deployment. So only if it is approved, we could click on proceed and then it will proceed further with the prod deployment. This is again we do to avoid any accidental deployment to prod. Okay, if we don't do anything over here and leave it as it is, it will just wait for 5 days and then it will time out and abort the pipeline. Okay, so I'll just click proceed over here. And it says failed to extract Maven build tar.gz. Let's see the exact error. access denied. So make sure your directory in which the web application is there has enough permission. So I'll just log into my prod server. This is my prod server. I'll go to this particular directory. I actually wanted you to see the error. That is why I have kept it as it is as part of this video. So you see the index.html, the file that is already present. It doesn't have much permissions other than from the root directory. So I'll do a sudo chmod -r 777 var html and all the directory recursively. Okay, hit clear and it should be good. Now let's re-trigger the pipeline. So you could run the pipeline from a particular stage. If you don't want to create the build again, you could just trigger that particular stage as well. Okay, but for this time, let's do a rebuild. Okay, I'll open Blue Ocean again. Test cases have been triggered. It is asking again the deployment approval for prod. I hit proceed. And deployment has been completed this time. See, the steps have been performed. So let's see if our website is up or not. So prod server, I'll copy the public DNS from here. I'll open this in a new tab. And I don't see the pipeline. I don't see the web page. It's because we already have a HTML file over there in the same folder. Okay, so I'll just remove this index.html. systemctl restart Apache 2. Okay, hit refresh. Now we see our application up and running over here. So I'm logged into my Jenkins instance. The first step is to download and install the plugin of multi-branch pipeline. If you are wondering what exactly is multi-branch pipeline, so as the name suggests, it works with multiple branches at the same time. Like we have our normal pipeline that we have looked into the previous video, which is this one. So this is one of your Jenkins pipeline, but it only has one branch. Each of the branch would be a tedious task. So then Jenkins multi-branch pipeline comes into the picture. So let's go ahead and install the plugin first. So we'll go to manage Jenkins, manage plugins, and look for the available plugin in multi-branch because I have already installed. So for me, it will be there in the install section. So if I search for multi-branch, should be here somewhere. Here it is, multi-branch pipeline. So make sure you install the plugin first. So once you do that and you click on new item from here, it will be visible over here, multi-branch pipeline, right? So I'll do test multi-branch. This is the name and I'll select this option, hit OK. Then this would look pretty similar to that of the Jenkins pipeline. In branch sources, I'll add the Git repository where my Jenkins file is. So this is my repository over here. Okay, and this repository has two branches, develop and master. Main branch is the default one and doesn't have much details. So I'll skip that one. We have two branches for this, develop and master. The idea is to deploy the code in development environment from develop branch, and master branch will be used to deploy in the production environment. I'll copy the repository URL from here, the SSH URL. Copy it, I'll paste it over here in the project repository. I'll choose the credentials and basically it will discover the branches. This is the default behavior. So you can leave this as it is and rest all the things you can leave as it is. Make sure your Jenkins file name is the same, or you can customize the script path and the file name as well. And I'll just keep rest of the options as default, hit apply and save. Once I do that and click over here, scan multi-branch pipeline now, it will scan all the branches that are there in that repository. So if I click back again over here, you see there are 2 branches and they have been auto detected by the multi-branch pipeline, and build has been triggered for each of the branches. So if I go back to my Jenkins file once again, so this is the same file that I have used in my previous videos. So make sure you watch the Jenkins pipeline video, as that one is the prerequisite for this video. I have told this before as well. And in that particular video, I've explained each and everything about this Jenkins file. Over here, we just made a simple change. In the deploy dev section, we added a condition which says when branch is developed, then perform these actions. When branch is master, then perform these actions. This is basically just to tell the pipeline that if the branch is developed, you deploy the code in your dev server. If the branch is master, you deploy the code in your prod server. If we go back, so builds are still running. So let's wait for a few minutes. I'll just pause the video and then we'll come back and see more details on this. So as we see, there is a green tick over here. That means this particular job has been completed successfully. So let's get into it. Click on that. Open the job and click on Blue Ocean. Right. So all the stages have been completed except the deploy prod state. This is due to the fact that we mentioned in the pipeline explicitly that deploy in dev only when the branch is developed, which is over here, and deploy in prod only when the branch is master, right? That is why it skipped this particular section over here. So if you click on that, you see it's been deployed to the dev environment successfully, and there is nothing over here, right? And it says it's been skipped. In the same way, the same would have been done for prod as well. Let's check that as well. I'll go back. So it says it's still in progress and I'll tell you why. Click on master and then go to Blue Ocean plugin, open Blue Ocean, right? It is at the pause state because if you look closely over here, it has timeout and input message specified over here, which again I have explained in the previous video. So it will ask you if you want to proceed further or abort the deployment. So as a approver, I'll just click on proceed. And once I do that, the deployment to prod will be completed. And in this case as well, you see the deploy dev stage was skipped because the branch is master, right? So this is how we basically use multi-branch pipeline. Both the pipelines have been completed and they both were part of one single multi-branch pipeline, which is test multi-branch. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I feel that you would have found this valuable, and if you did, give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section if you have any doubts or if you need any clarification, and share it with your friends, colleagues, whoever can take advantage from this learning. And I will see you soon with the next video. Till then, take care, keep learning.